Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So in our previous class, the Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, we found that Swami Shardananji says that the Lord has promised in the Gita that whenever there is a decline in religion, that is yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavatu bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamiham. I manifest myself. How? By embracing one's own Maya. Ishvara has the unmanifest Brahman, the pure consciousness that is Brahman, we discussed in our Vedanta class yesterday. He resorts to the help of his Shakti, which is also known as Maya. So he, as it were, embraces Maya, and then the creation starts. He incarnates. Now, an incarnation is known as Mayadhisha. Mayadhisha means one who is the Lord of Maya. He is not born because creation, Prakriti or Maya has forced him to do. No, he is Ishvara, one who lords over the power of his own Maya. It is not that Maya is something else. The popular idea is that Purusha is one and Prakriti is independent. No. According to Vedanta, it is the Shakti of Shiva. According to Tantras also, as we will find in our next class, which we will hold at 8:30 about the mantra. So the God and his word, Nam and Nami. Nama is the name of the Lord and the Lord himself. They cannot be separated. When he takes up name and form through his own Maya, it is that he is in full control of his own Maya, Mayadhisha. That is the basic difference between a Jiva and a Shiva. One has to identify oneself with Shiva, constantly try to meditate on the Lord, so that the effect of his own Maya, by his own grace, is not there upon the Jiva. It just vanishes. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the moment you recognize Maya, it vanishes. It is there, but it is not there at the same time. It is not there in a permanent sense. Because the Lord creates out of his own Maya, he becomes incarnate to show the way how to get rid of Maya. It's a rather strange thing, which Shankaracharya in his commentary on the Upanishads, trying to explain this concept of Maya. Swamiji has very beautifully done it in his two talks on Maya, which he gave, Maya and Freedom, in Piccadilly in London. These were his two famous talks, and they were the best talks according to him. Somebody asked him, of all the London talks, he spoke many things on the absolute harmony of religions, universal religions, but he considered his talk on this concept of Maya, which was for the first time, people thought it is some kind of, people in the West, I mean, rational people. They said just now, Shankaracharya and all these Advaitins simply dismiss the world as Maya, and how can it be unreal? So there was so much of confusion in the minds of people. They did not know what exactly this Maya is, whether it exists or does not exist, whether it is Sat or Asat. If it is Asat, then how can it be Sat? So that is why Shankaracharya calls it Anirvachaniya, when that which cannot be described. It is so strange that the same Maya, as Sri Ramakrishna puts it in a beautiful way, he says Avidya Maya binds you and Vidya Maya liberates you. Now, what is this Vidya Maya and what is this Avidya Maya? Why there are two Mayas in the first place? These are the fundamental questions of Vedanta. That by its very nature, The world is designed in such a way, if you find this gross world always full of joy, always full of happiness, then why will people try to get rid of that, get rid of the bondage of Maya? Why do we try to get rid of any kind of bondage? Physical bondage, when we find that we are physically unable to achieve certain things. We want to be rich, we cannot do. So we think it's a bondage. To be born in poverty, we think it's a bondage. That is physical Maya or physical bondage. How do you try to get rid of that? By removing poverty, by doing everything that removes our poverty, removes our wants. But does it stop? Because once we find that we have what we really need to survive, unlike the animals, of course, who are happy and content. The lion, for example, is said to be the king of animals. He may be a very powerful animal, but he also does not kill if he doesn't have to. If his stomach is full, he doesn't kill. You know, these are my needs. Whenever the needs are not fulfilled, he kills. But human beings sometimes can be worse than these animals. He knows these are the things which will satisfy my need, but he is greedy for more and more and more. That is Maya. So Sri Ramakrishna says there is one Maya which takes you towards the gross world, another that liberates you and takes you towards the spirit. We discussed that is the essential idea behind all our spiritual pursuits, that we have to take recourse to Vidya Maya to get rid of Avidya Maya. Now, if human beings are not possible to recognize Vidya Maya and to know the impact of Maya on himself and the society around him, then the Lord himself has to come and show what Vidya Maya is. He has to embrace. And mind you, Swami Shardananji makes it very clear that he doesn't come with the positive Maya alone. He himself undergoes all the suffering. And he shows, because otherwise how will the worldly person or a person who is held or bound by this with Avidya Maya, how will he come to know it is bad? So he himself assumes a body, as it were. He uses his Avidya Maya also to give him a body. He suffers from hunger, thirst, and all the other pangs of suffering which ordinary human being does. But the human being or Jiva does it out of bondage. Whereas Shiva does it because he is free. He is using his Avidya Maya and also the Vidya Maya, both to show what is the impact of bondage on the human soul and how to get rid of that bondage. So we cannot say Maya is or Maya is not. That is what Swami Vivekananda in his London lectures he tries to explain. It is a pure statement of fact. Things that we see around us every day. We know we are not going to live eternally, but we dream because there is that eternal Sat within us. We think that we are eternal. We are eternal, in fact. But we try to find that eternal nature in the body. When we see that the body is not eternal, some wise people then say, okay, let us find maybe our mind is eternal. But even then, we find that the mind waxes and wanes. It is good sometimes, sometimes bad. There is so much of transformation going on in our minds. And sometimes we even lose that sort of consciousness, the so-called mind, when we are in coma or something like that. Then we wonder what happens. Why is this not eternal? Why is this not permanent? Okay, the body, I know it's made of physical materials. It will disintegrate and die. But what about the mind? It has to survive. So people dream all sorts of things and then promise you heaven. So don't worry, if you die for religion, that there are so many fanatical sects which believe that you do go on doing punya and then you will have eternal heaven. That is not going to be, because the law of karma says you do a little good. No doubt your mind has done some meritorious work for say 100 years or maybe 200 years or maybe even 500 years. After life, after birth, you have struggled to do good service and accumulated a lot of punya, as Nachiketa's father was trying to acquire, and that merit he thought will take him to heaven. But the Vedantins say that even that heaven is temporary. It cannot be permanent, because you cannot have infinite joy when you, the law of causation, you work hard for 500 years, you may get heaven for 500 years. In a subtle plane, even if we consider that to be a very joyful state, which it is not, but even suppose we consider it, the heaven, to be a, which the most of the people promise. So they promise, people in the sense, some of the scriptures promise you that you will get eternal hell or eternal heaven if you do bad things. Even eternal hell is not possible, because for a limited faults which you have done for a few hundred years, you can't suffer eternally in hell. So in both ways, both the cases, a wise person knows that there is something other than our mind and the subtle body, and these heavens and hells and the life on the earth or on the moon or anywhere else, wherever life exists, if it exists other than that on the earth, it's not going to be permanent. But even though it is not permanent, that desire to eternally exist, that clinging to life, we cannot explain, and that is Maya. According to Swamiji, he says, how is it that knowing fully well that we are not eternal, we still dream about the eternal? Knowing fully well that life is not full of joy, we run after joy because sorrow comes. Why don't we accept the fact? So he gives some wonderful examples, though it is not part of today's today's topic, but still, because we have to understand why Sri Krishna has promised that he embraces his own Maya, because he is in control of that Maya. He knows the impact of Maya. Incarnations, unlike human beings, are not bound by Maya, they control Maya. So through their grace, by meditating on them, by uniting our consciousness with the Supreme Consciousness, the Jiva can aspire to get all the powers of the Ishvara, or not all the powers, all the through his grace, he can get, at least he can aspire to get rid of Maya. He can hope to catch hold of the Vidya Maya and destroy the Avidya Maya. And that is how one regains one's peace, regains one's true nature, which is Satchidananda. So now, here Sri Swami Shardananji argues or says that there was a decline in religion, especially in India, when, as he explained, that in a race, because of this conflict of two ideas, one is the materialistic West, which we tried to imitate but could not succeed. So we were neither here nor there. We lost both. As they say, you lose this world as well as the next. I mean, you lose your spirituality because of your superstition, or because of the Western people, the Western education told us it is useless, you follow us. But neither could we reach the excellence, levels of excellence the Westerners reached. So the condition was really pitiable. We neither had our own culture, which we had lost because of our foolishness. So also in the imitation does not give us the real culture. So even if we thought, or we assumed, that the Western culture can save us, we can become better human beings, we tried to get that, but that was denied to us deliberately, maybe by the colonial powers. They didn't want us to be prosperous, because so even though that ideal was there, that desire was there, that we should be great, at least externally, materially, as great as the Western powers, and get freedom, and then try to become as strong as them, the Western powers, the colonial powers. So that also we lost, because imitation would not make us. We have to work hard for that. Even to gain some kind of materialism, to achieve success in the material life, also you have to struggle. So giving up that giving up the spiritual for this, we lost both. That is what Swami Shardananji says. That was the pitiable condition when the incarnation felt now the adharma or uh, the situation is so bad that for reinstalling dharma, sarva dharma sthapakastvam sarva dharma swarupini. That is avatara. We chanted the avatara, the Ramakrishna mantra, which Swami Vivekananda composed spontaneously. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharma swarupine avatara varisthaya. He was a great incarnation because he came not only to establish Hindu religion, but he established every religion, the core religion, the Sanatana Dharma, which is the core of every religion. So Sthapakaya cha dharmasya. He didn't say which dharma. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharma swarupine. So he was not a combination. He is the essential truth of each religion he had experienced in his own life, and he came to establish that. So that is why Swamiji said that Sri Ramakrishna teaches everybody, teaches a Hindu to be a better Hindu, a Muslim to become a better Muslim, a Christian to become a better Christian. That is how he described it. Swami Vivekananda described the message of his master in these few words, the Parliament of Religions, and everywhere else, wherever he went, he spoke about this message. Do I wish that a Hindu becomes a Muslim, or a Muslim becomes a Hindu, or a Christian becomes a Hindu, or a Hindu? That is not what my master taught. A Hindu has to be a true Hindu. Then he has to understand the core values of his religion. And when he does that, the dharma sthapana helps. The establishment of dharma helps. Dharma happens. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya. To establish that core, that religion, that core of the core values of religion, he came. Sarva dharma, and he was the manifestation of all the different religions, all the different paths. And that is how peace, eternal peace comes. Not by holding conferences or trying to tolerate each other. You may tolerate for a while, but after all, the animal instincts in man comes, and then they start quarreling, ethnic cleansing, and all the wars that you see. It's not just because of wealth, it is also religion is one of the main causes. So wrong understanding of the dharma, when adharma predominates or becomes too full in society. So to restore religion, to restore that dharma, the God incarnates. So in Mahabharata also we see the adharma was apparently was trying to take the upper hand. But the Lord had to come. And though we think, how can the Lord encourage such a big war where so many people were killed? But then the reality is that it's not the Lord is keen to have these wars. Because of dharma, not following dharma, when adharma rises, a balance has to be maintained. And embracing his own Maya, the Lord becomes incarnate. His role may differ. He may do it in a very sattvic and subtle way. In the avatar as Rama or Krishna, maybe he had to take up arms, or he had to follow a different path. As Jesus, he followed another path. As Buddha, he had to follow another path. So as Sri Ramakrishna, he felt intense compassion arose, and the Lord incarnates to protect dharma. So Swami Shardananji is asking this question: will not humankind's emptiness and anxiety, which is facing because of losing both the ideals, especially in India, that we became anxious because we were neither here nor there. We could not assimilate the Western ideas, which we thought would make us happy, nor could we hold on to our old spiritual ideals. And when the very existence of dharma or spirituality was threatened, the Lord came to remove the emptiness that human being, the anxiety of human beings. To remove that, God had to assume a human body and to show the way. So then Swami Shardananji concludes by saying, O Lord, O reader, the need of the age has accomplished this task. The Lord has truly appeared as a world teacher. So, what is the intention of writing this book? He says, listen with faith to his blessed messages. What are those? He has selected two messages, which both of which were mentioned by Holy Mother also when somebody asked her. But I'll first speak about what Shardanji says. He says, listen with faith to his blessed messages. Which are those messages? As many faiths, so many paths. So there's no question of tolerating others, accepting that all paths lead to the same goal. That is his first message. Then the second, which is a corollary to this message, is you will realize God through any spiritual discipline if you practice it wholeheartedly. So with Vyakulta, I used to use that Bengali word Vyakulta. So he says if Vyakulta is there, then any path, and he gave a wonderful example that somebody wants to go to Puri. He starts from Calcutta. He doesn't know the way. But he is very keen that he will somehow reach Puri. Today or tomorrow he wants to start, and he starts. Unless he has that yearning to reach Puri, he will simply plan and plan and plan. Oh, I'll find out the way, somebody will guide me, then I'll go. No, he has to just start. And when he starts, he perhaps takes a few wrong steps. But then he is corrected, then he again goes back. Somebody comes and shows the right way. Then he takes the right road. Then again, maybe he makes a few mistakes. But ultimately, he will reach Puri. If the Puri is a place south of Calcutta. So, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you practice any path and practice it wholeheartedly, you will reach the goal. Any spiritual discipline is fine. This is his second important message, which is just a corollary to his message, as many faiths, Joto Mat, Toto Path. As many faiths, so many paths. Now, he says, now after that, a very important message which Holy Mother thought was more important than this harmony of faiths. And that is, reflect intensely. I'm repeating again. He says, reflect intensely upon the superhuman renunciation and austerity Sri Ramakrishna practiced to revive the supreme knowledge. Knowledge is not something you can get. This supreme knowledge, I'm not talking of secular knowledge. Spiritual knowledge is something which cannot be acquired without supreme sacrifice, superhuman renunciation and austerities. Austerity is not for the sake of just torturing the body or anything, but just trying to control, trying to see that the body doesn't dominate or the mind does not dominate us and cause bondage to us. We have to control it. So that is the reason why tapas or austerities are performed. Just to tell the body that I am the master. The buddhi is the master, not the other way around. The horses cannot be the master. The sense organs cannot be our masters. Otherwise, the chariot will crash, because if you give them permission, they will go wherever they like. Each one will pull in a different direction. So, buddhi, yesterday also we discussed, the awakening of the buddhi is the first thing we have to do in spiritual practices. We will be discussing that topic at 8:30. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say that till that buddhi is awakened by superhuman renunciation. Why is renunciation necessary? Why is austerities are required? Austerities are required just to tell the body and the mind who is the boss. The buddhi has to tell, I am the charioteer, I will decide which way the chariot will go, not the other way around. If you allow the horses to take the decision, then you will crash. So, to perform austerities is not the goal, it is a means to the goal. What is the goal? The goal is to reach total freedom. And how do you do it? By controlling the horses, by performing austerities. Austerities just means that. The horses say, I want to go this way, and you keep on telling the horses, no, you go this way only. This is the only way you should be going. Then only you reach the goal. And what about super vairagya or superhuman renunciation, which Holy Mother says was his main message? Why did he have to renounce? Because As Jesus said, you can't have God and mammon at the same time. Now, what does it mean? Why can't we have both at the same time? So it's like if you go to the east, you have to leave the west behind. Any fool will tell us that. So if we want to become subtle, go towards the subtle, you have to leave the gross. That is Vairagya in simple terms. Nothing very complicated. And yes, as yesterday we discussed the wonderful example of the ocean and the waves. Each wave thinks there's so much of turbulence. That is what happens in our body and minds. At the surface, there is huge turbulence, but if you dive deep, the ocean is calm. So if you want to float or to swim in the calm and enjoy the peace of the deep ocean, you have to dive deep. That beautiful song is there, Doob, 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 Roop Shagore, Amar Mon. It's telling the mind, don't float on the surface. You'll just be tossed here and there by the big and small waves, and your restlessness will increase. Just dive deep. The more deeper you dive, you will find Ratna Dhan, means lot of jewels on the bed of the sea. The deeper you go, the more joy you will find. That is the idea. So the idea was Sri Ramakrishna practiced these things to show to the world how to revive that supreme knowledge. Then he says, how to do it? Come, let us purify ourselves by studying and meditating on his pure and divine life. It's not a question of just trying to understand, intellectually understand. One has to use this class or this study to meditate and purify. Purify our life means become less and less gross. Automatically, when you listen to a life which was full of vairagya and these austerities and full of divine bliss, when you meditate slowly over a period of time, you imbibe those qualities. You imbibe all the qualities, whatever you want to manifest. That is Patanjali's yoga. But Patanjali does not specify a particular object. He says, be careful which object you choose, because you'll get the characteristics of that object. So if you meditate on cruelty or a cruel animal, your nature will be like that. Then you should not blame Patanjali for that. He says these are the pitfalls. You can choose any object because scientifically that will work. But if you don't choose the object of meditation judiciously, then you will land yourself into more and more trouble. So that is one of the reasons why we discuss all these great lives, not to understand, because we'll never understand. It is so complicated. Though it appears simple, but to change ourselves, to transform ourselves, we try to meditate. That is why he says, come, let us purify ourselves. The easiest way to purify ourselves is by repeating his name and thinking about his Leela, which is also known as Leela Chintan. So, Leela Chintan is what is meant here. Leela Chintan. So he says, let us study and meditate on his means Thakur's pure life. That is the goal of, and according to in the first chapter, that is what he sets about, saying that is the goal. So now we will come to the next chapter. This chapter is over. So yeah, 1 minute. We'll go to the next chapter, which is his birth, because after that there are so many other discussions, but we will first describe, just as we described the divine birth of Holy Mother, and Swami Shardananji puts forward the same argument. Why these incarnations are born in humble families? Most of the history of all these people, all these great incarnations, shows that except Buddha and Ramachandra, they were the only two who were born in royal families. And here also he explains that it is only in these poor families, somehow poverty is intimately connected with the birth of these incarnations, because it is only then they have this wonderful mm, sensitivity to human suffering. If they themselves don't suffer, they willingly undergo all these sufferings, because they know that, unless an incarnation shows, he assumes the limitations which uh, human beings have. If he comes with all riding a celestial, that is what our Puranas tell us, they have infinite powers. If they come with all those external powers, then people will say, okay, it's possible for an incarnation to do all these things, but it is impossible for human beings like us who are bound. So we cannot compare ourselves with that life. So he has to assume a similar life as we human beings, and bondage that bondage, though it has been willingly accepted, but it is real. Swami Shardanji in fact discusses about this fact. Are they acting? Though it is known as the divine play, uh, you have to remember one thing. Swami Shardanji clearly says that they undergo that suffering, that otherwise they just don't play act. It's like not like in a drama that they imitate there. They may not be bound, but the suffering they undergo is real. But because they have control over the Maya, they don't get caught in it. So even with the Jivan Mukta and the uh, others, you will find in other great prophets' lives, they are, or even the others who came with Sri Ramakrishna, the Leela searcher uh, as they are known as, uh, they also are have to undergo suffering. Swami Vivekananda suffered so much. So, as we said, in Holy Mother's life also we discussed that Ramchandra, except Ramchandra and Lord, but even Buddha's life, if you find, it is not that he was always happy. Till a certain stage, his father saw to it that he never saw any kind of happiness, any kind of unhappiness or misery. He was always kept in the midst of lot of joy and enjoyment and other things, so that he doesn't see the negative side of life. But somehow he one day happened to go out and he saw the whole world, as not his whole kingdom. He wanted to see how people live, and when he saw that, he found that there is so much of suffering outside. The death of a man, a sick man, a old man, all these things brought to him very clearly the transient nature of our life. And he set about in he set out in a quest to understand how he can solve this problem. This problem was new to him. So though he was not born in a poor family, he was born in a very rich family, was a born son of a king, but still he had to be exposed to suffering. So, although Sri Krishna, for example, Rama, of course, lived in a palace, but even then he had to go to on Vanvas, he had to go to the forest because of that boon which Kaikeyi had got from her husband, and she became envious of Rama and asked him to go to the forest. So even he had to suffer. But even Sri Krishna, though he belonged to a royal dynasty, he was not born in a poor family. He was born in a prison and spent his whole life in a community of poor cowherds in Gokul. So, and separated from his own relatives, his parents and all. He had that kind of suffering. So Lord Jesus also, we know, he was born in the stable of an inn, brought glory to his poor parents. That is what Shardanji says. Shankara was born after his father's death. He was in his mother's womb when his father died. He became a son of a poor widow. So Chaitanya's parents were also most ordinary. And then we also know Prophet Muhammad, also the founder of Islam, came from a poor family. So these great souls were born in families where there was a lot of contentment, even though they were poor. Suffering and poverty were common factors. But in spite of that poverty, as in India at least, poverty is not equated with misery. One may be poor, but one, if his needs are met, somehow his needs, basic needs are met, they are very happy people. That is why this happiness index, there was a study made where some of the South Asian countries who did not have a very big, GDP, or as you want to say, that they don't have a very big GDP, but the poverty levels, there's still a lot of underprivileged people. But that has GDP has nothing to do with the happiness index. There is a happiness index. They know of a way to measure the happiness of people. There are many ways. It's a very scientific study that they do. The happiness index of each country. So contrary to popular belief that rich countries with a high GDP will be more happy than the poor countries. No, it was not so. Most of some countries like Bangladesh and other countries, they found they have a very high happiness index based on the survey that they made. Just as we do the census, there is a survey which is made, and they feel that if their needs are fulfilled, they are happy. The greed may not be so much. Where there is selflessness and love in the midst of poverty, there is happiness. If one is selfless, if one is not, ego is not so prominent in one's life, that greed is not there, then though one is born in the midst of hardship, suffering, the hearts of their poor parents, normally the parents of these great incarnations, they had this renunciation, purity, steadfast human nature, humaneness, you can say, or compassion, charity, all of them invariably were born with these qualities. It's not a coincidence, but it is a matter of fact that Sri Ramakrishna's parents, he had to suffer a lot. As we will see now, Khudiram had to suffer. He had to leave his village because he would not testify falsely. Because of some rich, powerful zamindar wanted, he had taken away somebody's land, and he knew that if the judge, if he testifies in front of the judge that this property belongs to this goon who was a very powerful person in the village. So he forced him. He said, you have to, because the judge will believe you. You never have spoken untruth, but you have to do it. Otherwise, I'll drive you out of Dere village. That was his ancestral village. But he did not give up truth. He preferred to live with all his house and belongings. He was driven out because he did not agree to falsely testify against somebody, some poor person whom he was trying to drive out. So because of that, he suffered, but that noble quality of truth he adhered to, and in spite of his becoming poor, he somehow managed to earn a living and lead a very happy life. Similarly, with Srima Sharda Devi's birth, you will find. So also all the other incarnations. So Swami Shardananji says here that if we reflect carefully, one can see a subtle connection. Why they are born in poor families. If we see very carefully, I mean, he, like a lawyer, is analyzing everything. If you see the beauty of this great master, you will find that Swami Shardananji is not just writing a biography, just mentioning a few incidents, glorifying the Lord. No, he wants to, he asks a question always. Why is it that the great people, the great incarnations are born only in poor families? He had a great sense of history. So you saw in the beginning how he traced the development of materialism in the West, how it impacted the East, what were the ideals of the East, was there a national ideal, what did we do for thousands of years, why we suffered, why we came to this pitiable condition. Everything he analyzes, and then he says, why did Sri Ramakrishna incarnate? So after having done that, even his childhood, why he was born in a poor family, why do incarnations are normally born in as a general rule in poor families. So he looks at history and then tries to analyze. He wants to rationally understand that it is not by chance that they are born in poor families. Is there a connection? So only through spiritual insight one can understand the actions and the glory of the Lord and his divine play. The great master or the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna can be understood with an incisive mind and a great spiritual insight. So, is there a subtle connection between the avatar's birth in poverty and the future course of their lives? If they had no previous awareness, that is what we argued, that is what we saw even in Holy Mother's life, that if they had no previous awareness of and sympathy for the condition of the poor, how could they in later life accomplish their mission to give solace and peace to the societies afflicted, the poor and the persecuted? They have to be born. They have to be. Krishna was persecuted. In fact, his life was in danger. Throughout his life, he was in danger that Kamsa will kill him. In fact, so many attempts were made to kill him in Gokula. When he somehow managed to escape the prison, where he would have been killed if he were to be there. So somehow, through divine intervention, he managed to escape. But after escaping also, he had to undergo lot of suffering, affliction, and he was also persecuted. So that covers the entire category: the underprivileged people, the persecuted people, the afflicted people of society. Maybe we can say it is because of their karma, but how to overcome it? How to overcome suffering? By following the principles of religion. It is for this reason, Swami Shardanji says, they come with a mission to give solace and peace, not to happy people, not to rich people. They come to help people fight not only poverty, but some kind of affliction, mental, physical, and persecution. Sometimes it is self-induced. We create our own problems. Sometimes we are persecuted by other problems. You may say that it is because of karma these things happen. But still, the Lord has to take the responsibility and find out a solution. Whether you are afflicted because you are of your own foolishness, the misery that you are undergoing is because of your own foolishness, that is one reason. Or you are born poor because of, you may say it is destiny, but it is because of previous karma. But in any case, the poverty, the underprivileged people face, the affliction that face due to their own reason, if the cause may lie with them, or they may be persecuted by other people. In either case, how to face it? However, so Swami Shardanji says this is not the sole purpose for their advent. This is one of the reasons why they are born in poor families. So they just don't come to remove the sufferings of people. That is a major role they have to play. So he says, as we have previously discussed, the avatars come to halt the decline of religion. On one side, they have to show a way out of this suffering, affliction, and the persecution that people undergo, to how to face it. And the second is to halt the decline of religion. To fulfill that mission, they first become intimately familiar. So how nicely Swami Shardanji is building up the logic. What they do, why did Sri Ramakrishna have to practice so many different religious paths? So they have to first familiarize themselves with the different religious paths, religious laws, reflect upon them, and find out if they are responsible for the present religious degradation. If something happens, as the communists or the scientists say, oh, it is because of religion. Is religion really the cause, or wrong practice of religion is the cause? Just as you can't blame science for these wars and the weapons of mass destruction. Science follows truth. The scientific principles teach you to follow truth wherever it leads you. But that doesn't mean science, because some people are misusing science. So also some people are misusing religion. What is the cause of the religious degradation? What are the values that people are not holding on to? What are the core values they should hold on to so that religion becomes a positive factor in human transformation and human nobility? What are the factors that they have to hold on to? What are the core principles? That is exactly what an avatara, according to Swami Shardanji, has to do. He has to first, he can't say idol worship like most of the people in those days. It was a fashion to blame everything on a Murti Puja. The Brahmos came, everybody started lecturing, like Master Mashe also came and Thakur tried to tell Thakur, you see, out of ignorance, they are worshipping an stone idol. Should they not be told that this is wrong, this is superstition? Then Sri Ramakrishna said, who are you to tell? First, you set right your own house. You are having now, you were about to go and commit suicide because of some domestic problem, and you can't solve that, and you are trying to tell the so-called ignorant people who follow this, maybe they are worshipping an image, but they are psychologically much more balanced than you. Why don't you see what is the, why do they worship an idol image? You don't have to correct, but that was the trend in those days. Everything was blamed on religion, following the typical Western mentality or the so-called materialistic ideas from the West. They said, don't follow the spirit, it is all empty talk. See how your religion has just caused poverty. So Sri Ramakrishna has to understand, reflect on the causes of the religion's present degradation. After finding out the cause, he has to suggest some solutions. So that is the second role of Avatara, as Swami Shardanji tries to argue, and he has to discover a new dispensation, unlike the Brahmos and others who just said, throw away this, without examining the pros and cons of Murti Puja or all the different things that passed by the name of superstition in those days. It was a fashion to say, oh, I don't believe. Even Swami Vivekananda, when he first came with Brahmanand, they did not bow down because their Brahmo training told them, you should not bow down before a image of Kali or any other image in the temple. So they used to directly come. In fact, they never bowed down before anybody. So without considering the merits and demerits of why people do certain things, to dispose it off and call it a superstition is not a scientific attitude. So the incarnation, according to Swami Shardanji, has to understand what things are to be retained, what is the core of religion, and prescribe a new dispensation according to that particular time and place in order to revive those ancient laws in spirit, not verbatim. I mean, there may be some laws which were valid in the past, but the incarnation has to come, take the core values and modify it according to the present circumstances, according to the time and place. This is very important. According to the time, the need of the day. The need of the day during Krishna's time was to kill evil people, and the Mahabharata war did that to a large extent. There was no other way. Physically, one had to destroy. But when Sri Ramakrishna came, the needs were different. It was an ideological battle that had to be countered. An ideology which would have thrown, as they say, the baby with the basin. The basin with Swamiji used to give that example. In trying to say everything is superstition, you throw out religion altogether. That is like, you want to, the water is dirty in a basin, the baby is washed. You want to throw the water, you throw the baby also. So it is something like that. So to revive those ancient laws, you have to find out what is to be thrown, what is to be retained, and what are the core values which are to be adhered to. So now another point which Swami Shardanji says, and I will close after this because we have one more session at 8:30, is he says the huts of the poor, the same thing we saw in the gospel, the life of Holy Mother yesterday, that the huts of the poor and not the palaces of the rich offer the opportunity, at least in those days, to become intimate with religious traditions. So, it is the poor person who, unfortunately, though is deprived of worldly enjoyment, he holds fast to God and his dispensation because he needs God more. When you have plenty, when you don't need God for your survival, then you don't bother because you think that your the riches that you have, the wealth that you have, that is enough to lead a happy life. That is exactly what happened in the case of Buddha. Till he saw suffering, till he got a big shock and found out that all his wealth, all his power, his father though nicely protected him, but he wanted an answer. He said, why will I undergo all these transformations? He said, yes. Oh, what makes you think that you'll always be healthy and strong and rich? So this idea that this Swami Shardanji says here, that the poor person, because he is in direct contact with the transitoriness of human life. Every day he doesn't know where he'll get his next meal. Of course, extreme poverty is also not conducive to spiritual life. As Sri Ramakrishna said, khali pete dharma hoy na, means there cannot be religion on empty stomach. I'm not talking of empty stomach. Poverty doesn't mean, normally in India, uh, poverty can also be voluntary. For example, the Brahmins, if they are real Brahmins, they were supposed to embrace voluntary poverty, as Sri Ramakrishna's father and all did. They are not supposed to hoard wealth. That was the role which was given to Vaishyas. That is why when they say the Brahmin is the highest caste, he has to prove it by showing that he has these qualities of austerity. He was not given the highest position just like that. So you can't have a rich Brahmin enjoying his privilege as a Brahmin. That was never intended. This caste system has to be understood very, very systematically and scientifically. It's not that these Sri Ramakrishna's parents or Holy Mother's parents, they could not earn money. He could have simply told a lie and stayed in stayed in Dere village. He did not have to leave his house and property and everything, driven out by a goon, because he has to hold on to certain values. He has to hold on to truth. He has to hold on to spirituality, even if it means giving up certain material, giving up one's own material welfare. That makes him a true Brahmin. And he was proud of his heritage. So what is wrong if there is that idea that you, as Swamiji says, in England, if they were all criticizing that you have this caste system, he said, you have your own caste, you have the aristocracy. A rich person, a royal family will not mix with the ordinary people. Is that not a caste? Your caste is based on money, but our caste is based on renunciation. The more you give up, the higher the caste. The most respected person in our country is not the richest person, but the one who gives up everything. So renunciation is the hallmark of Indian caste system. So in a way, Swami Vivekananda said, that is the basic difference. In the West, you have a class system. You may not have a caste, which is worse, because that class system is based on your wealth, your power, your aristocracy, your birth, your lineage. Of course, in India also, later on, it degraded the caste system. People became rich and still called themselves Brahmin. But a Brahmin was supposed to be austere. He was supposed to follow the path of Brahma, realize Brahman in his life. If he has to do, then he has to give up this world. So Sri Ramakrishna, though many people felt why he was holding on to his own caste, that is because he showed through his life. As Swamiji says, when he sent Turiyananji to the West, he said, you see, because Turiyananji was born in a Brahmin family. So he said, now you saw a glimpse of the Kshatriya power. That is, he was referring to himself. Because Swamiji had to do so much of rajas, he had to induce within himself. Otherwise, he could have not have traveled. But he said, I am sending you somebody who represents the highest Brahmin power in India. And he says, I am sending you a person who is a Brahmin of Brahmins. So in that sense, because Turyananji was a very, very austere monk who would meditate, that is what a Brahmin is supposed to do. By becoming a Brahmin and running after money will disqualify him. He will become a Vaishya. So by his guna and karma, a caste is determined in India. That is a very important point we have to understand. As Swamiji mentioned it, don't criticize the caste system. If you want the privileges of a Brahmin, you have to give up the world, you have to give up wealth. It cannot be that the very idea, that is why people used to make fun, all the tales and parables, they will start a poor Brahmin. So a Brahmin has to be poor, otherwise the story doesn't start. And then they will say a rich merchant. Merchant cannot be poor because then he will not be a Vaishya or a Kshatriya. So a powerful king. They will not say poor king. It is a contradiction. But in stories, you will find all the wonderful stories, moral stories, a poor Brahmin. Then everybody asks, why can't a Brahmin be rich? No, then he will not remain a Brahmin. Then he will become a Vaishya. Because his job, see, these duties were given. Okay, you can't renounce, you can't practice spirituality. You have a right to earn wealth, but then you will not be given the privileges. Privileges were given only if you follow all the characteristics of a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya. Vaishya was allowed, but then he came down in the hierarchy of caste. You have your wealth, but you will not be given the same status, which is not there in other countries. In other countries, Swamiji says, if you are rich, you may be born in any family of slaves, but if you get wealth, you become an aristocrat. Or if you have some royal blood, you can say, I belong to the royal family, whether you have wealth or not. But anyway, that is class is a different system of dividing people. But caste, according to Swamiji. So here, this degradation, Swami Shardananji says, a poor person, he need not be poor because he is helpless. His father, none of these parents were helpless. They were highly educated in the sense, Shastras and all they knew. They were noble people, but they chose voluntary poverty. So poor should not be associated. In India, poverty is not a crime if it is voluntary. But ill-begotten wealth can be a crime. People don't respect such people. Whereas in the materialistic civilization, however you get money, whatever be the means you use, moral or immoral, if you have wealth, you are respected. So we have to understand these things. So in spite of widespread religious degradation, a glimpse of ancient religion was preserved in the poor person's hut in all over India. That is what Swami Shardanji says. That is why he says, not only in India, all over the world, the great teachers of the world are attracted by these poor by taking birth in these poor families. So the same situation occurred, and how it occurred in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, we will see in our next class. So today I think we may not have time. It is almost 8:06, so I have another class. I will answer. There is a question. The birth of some avatars are predicted in the Shastras. Is this a qualification? No. It has nothing to do. Most of these things were written later on. They are interpolations. So we need not go by that. History is something different. Though a lot of myths are there. But you have to read between the lines. Should not take these myths at verbatim. You just don't accept everything they say. So some scriptures may say that this was already predicted in this Purana, that Purana. But who knows, the Puranas may have been written afterwards. We do not know. There is no sense of history. So you have to remember, whenever you read Indian mythology or any mythology, you have to remember that history, facts may not be historical, but the values that they convey are more important. If we go by geography and history and all those things, it is not a science, secular science. They create these stories, however fantastic they may be, to convey a spiritual idea. Take the idea and throw away the historicity. That is the idea. So many people, if you go on bothering your heads about the historicity, then we'll never reach, will not get benefit by reading these wonderful stories. So I'll take leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So at about 8:30 we will meet the second class, which we will have on the Japa or the Mantra Shastra. So hope to see you all. But please remember, it is specifically intended for people who have had the fortune of to be initiated, or who are likely, are eager to. Otherwise, you may not find it so relevant. It's not a general topic which we will be discussing. If you are keen to attend that, you can join us in the same link as you did yesterday at 8:30, or you can use the same link which we used for this. So it was